My younger brother manipulated our parents into thinking I was a danger to the family to isolate me. 10 years later, they need a life-saving transplant only I can provide, and the price for my help is a full public confession of his lies. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, while my parents stared at me like I was a stranger. She threatened me, he said calmly, as if he were reporting a broken lamp. I blinked, stunned. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice shaking. But he didn't flinch. He turned to them and added, she said she'd hurt me if I told you about the money missing from Dad's wallet. That was the moment everything shifted. My parents didn't ask questions. They didn't look for proof. They just believed him. My mother gasped, stepping back like I was contagious. My father's jaw clenched and he pointed toward the stairs. Go to your room. Now. I didn't steal anything. I didn't threaten anyone. But none of that mattered. My brother had planted the seed weeks ago. Small lies, quiet whispers, twisted stories. He'd tell them I was moody, unstable, unpredictable. He'd exaggerate every disagreement, every raised voice, until they saw me not as their daughter but as a problem. The next morning my suitcase was packed. My father handed it to me without a word. My mother avoided my eyes. It's best if you stay somewhere else for a while, she said softly. Just until things calm down. I left that day with no goodbye hug, no promise to call, no belief that they'd ever ask for my side of the story. I moved into a small studio apartment on the edge of town. It smelled like dust and old paint. The walls were thin and the heater rattled like it had a cough. I sat on the floor that first night, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how my life had unraveled so quickly. I tried calling them. Once. Twice. Then I stopped. Each time my calls went unanswered. My texts were ignored. My brother had succeeded. He'd isolated me completely. I found work at a bookstore. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me something to do, somewhere to be. I shelved novels, rang up customers, and smiled when I didn't feel like it. I made friends with the owner, a kind older woman named Ruth, who always saved me the last cinnamon roll from the bakery next door. But even with Ruth's kindness, the loneliness clung to me. Birthdays came and went. No card. No call. Holidays passed in silence. I'd walk by families laughing in cafes, mothers hugging daughters, fathers carrying gifts, and I'd wonder what I had done to deserve being erased. One Christmas Eve I stood outside my parents' house. I didn't knock. I just watched from the sidewalk. Through the window I saw them gathered around the tree. My brother was there, smiling, handing out presents. My mother laughed at something he said. My father raised a glass. I turned away before they could see me. The emotional scars didn't show on my face, but they lived inside me. I stopped talking about my family to anyone. When people asked, I'd say, we're not close, and change the subject. I didn't cry often, but when I did, it was quiet, late at night under the covers where no one could hear. I kept journals. Pages filled with questions, anger, confusion. I wrote about the day they sent me away, the lies he told, the silence that followed. I wrote about the ache of being forgotten. Years passed. I built a life, piece by piece. I learned to cook for one. I decorated my apartment with thrift store finds. I read poetry and planted herbs on the windowsill. I smiled at neighbors and waved at the mailman. But the wound never fully healed. Sometimes I'd see siblings walking together, laughing, teasing. And I'd feel a pang, not just of loss but of betrayal. My brother hadn't just lied. He had taken something from me that I could never get back. And my parents, they had let him. They had chosen to believe him without question. They had turned their backs on me without hesitation. I didn't know if they missed me. I didn't know if they ever wondered what I was doing, where I was living, how I was surviving. But I knew one thing, I hadn't deserved it. And someday I told myself the truth would come out. Not through shouting. Not through confrontation. But through something they couldn't ignore. Something they'd have no choice but to face. It was a quiet evening when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It had been years since I'd heard their voices, and I had trained myself not to expect them. But something in me hesitated and I picked up. Hello. The pause on the other end was long, shaky. Then I heard my mother's voice, trembling, uncertain. It's me, she said softly. We need to talk. I froze. 10 years of silence, 10 years of birthdays and holidays alone, 10 years of being erased. And suddenly her voice was in my ear again. I didn't know whether to hang up or listen. My heart pounded, but I stayed quiet, waiting. She asked to meet. Her tone carried urgency, desperation. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The next day I walked into the cafe she had chosen. She was already there, sitting at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. When she saw me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. Guilt, fear, maybe both. She didn't waste time. "Your father and I were sick," she said, her voice breaking. "We both need transplants. The doctors tested everyone. You're the only match." The words hit me harder than I expected. I stared at her, trying to process. After everything they had done, after casting me out, believing his lies, they needed me. Before I could respond, my brother appeared. He slid into the chair beside her, calm, collected, as if this were just another family gathering. "We're glad you came," he said smoothly. "We need your help." I looked at him, the architect of my exile, the one who had poisoned their minds against me. His face carried no remorse, no recognition of the years he had stolen from me. He spoke as if nothing had happened, as if we were still siblings who shared secrets and laughter. "Help," I repeated, my voice low. "You want me to save them after what you did?" He leaned back, shrugging. "That was a long time ago. Let's not dwell on the past." The audacity of his words burned through me. He wanted me to forget, to erase the pain, to pretend his lies hadn't destroyed my life. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I'll help," I said finally, my voice firm. "But only on one condition." Both of them looked at me, startled. "He confesses," I continued. "Publicly. To everyone. He admits what he did, every lie he told, every manipulation. He tells the truth out loud where it can't be hidden." The silence that followed was heavy. My mother's eyes widened, her lips parted in shock. My father, who had joined us quietly, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My brother's expression hardened, his jaw tightening. "You can't be serious," he said, his voice sharp. "I'm very serious," I replied. "You don't get my help without the truth. That's the price." My mother reached for my hand, her fingers trembling. "Please," she whispered. "Don't make this harder than it already is." I pulled my hand back gently. "Harder? You think this is hard? Try living 10 years alone, branded as dangerous, abandoned by your own family. That was hard. This is justice." My father cleared his throat, his voice low. We didn't know. We believed him. "And now you'll hear him admit it," I said firmly. "That's the only way I'll agree." The tension at the table was unbearable. My brother's face flushed with anger, but beneath it I saw fear. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He knew I held the power now. For the first time in years, the balance had shifted. They needed me, and I wasn't going to give them what they wanted without the truth. The day arrived with a heaviness that pressed against my chest. I had insisted the confession be made in front of family and close friends, the very people who had once looked at me with suspicion, who had believed his lies without hesitation. The room was filled with familiar faces, some curious, some uneasy. I stood near the back, silent, watching. My brother walked to the front, his usual confidence stripped away. His hands trembled as he held the paper he had written, though I knew the words weren't rehearsed, they were forced. He cleared his throat, his voice breaking as he began. "For years I lied," he said, eyes darting around the room. "I twisted stories, exaggerated fights, and made my sister look like someone she wasn't. I told our parents she was dangerous. None of it was true." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My mother covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. My father's shoulders sagged, his head bowed. My brother's voice grew weaker as he continued. "I wanted attention. I wanted to be the favorite. And I destroyed her life to get it." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then my parents broke. My mother rushed toward me, her words tumbling out between sobs. "We're sorry. We should have listened. We should have seen you. We abandoned you when you needed us most." My father joined her, his voice low, heavy with regret. "We failed you. And we'll carry that shame forever." I stood still, letting their words wash over me. Part of me wanted to scream, to ask why it had taken 10 years, why they hadn't questioned sooner. But another part of me felt the weight lifting. The truth was finally out, spoken aloud, undeniable. The transplant came soon after. I agreed, not out of love or forgiveness, but because I needed closure. Lying in the hospital bed, I stared at the ceiling, listening to the steady hum of machines. The procedure was painful, the recovery slow, but I endured it with a strange calm. It wasn't about saving them. It was about ending the chapter that had haunted me for so long. When I returned home, I didn't rush back into their lives. I kept my distance, setting boundaries they had no choice but to respect. Calls came, sometimes visits, but I decided when and how to respond. I wasn't the forgotten child anymore. I was the one in control. Healing didn't happen overnight. There were days when memories resurfaced, sharp and bitter. But there were also moments of quiet relief, when I realized I no longer carried the burden alone. The truth had been spoken, the lies shattered. One evening, I sat by my window watching the sun dip below the horizon. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. The scars remained, yes, but they no longer defined me. My brother's confession had freed me from the shadows he had cast. My parents' apology, though late, had given me a measure of peace. I whispered to myself, "It's over." And for the first time in a decade, I believed it.